This is a short introduction to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and what can be done to avoid it. This has been created to support healthcare staff who are currently working in very difficult situations, but can actually be used by anybody who's finding themselves stressed and dealing with things that could be described as traumatic. PTSD can be described as including many symptoms, but four that are most commonly recognized include intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, panic, and nightmares. Following traumatic experiences, all of these symptoms can be common and do not in and of themselves indicate whether or not you have PTSD. And so please do not panic if you're experiencing these during difficult times at work, as this is very normal. A diagnosis of PTSD is arrived at when these symptoms continue for many months following the event. Of course, for many staff, the traumatic events may be ongoing and a daily occurrence in their work. This can make it difficult to identify whether or not you have developed PTSD, or whether these experiences are because you are in constant contact with traumatic experiences in your work. For many of you, there won't be a choice as to whether or not you can go to work and whether you can avoid traumatic experiences or high stress. In this situation, we'd like to offer you some support in how to handle these experiences to support positive well-being now and in the future. A great deal of research has been done to try and understand how PTSD develops. And one of the most common factors is an understanding that people who develop PTSD seem to avoid or try to avoid thinking about or feeling feelings that are connected to the traumatic experience that they have had. For many of us, it seems sensible to try not to dwell on a difficult experience or to park it in the back of our minds and push it away. Certainly this can be true for staff who are having to get up each day and return to very difficult circumstances. However, the energy taken to push these things to the back of our mind does not actually cause them to become processed or put away, and so we find that they return to us when our guard is down through the form of flashbacks or panic or intrusive thoughts or nightmares. And so some work is needed to be done to develop behaviours and habits that can help us to avoid this outcome. I'm going to propose here 7 strategies and then one exercise that you can use to help you avoid PTSD. These have been taken from research in individuals who've experienced similar events that were traumatic. It is important to maintain close contact and support with and from your family members and loved ones. When we feel in a state of crisis or trauma, we can sometimes hide away from others. I think this is something we need to deal with on our own. When you're with loved ones, it can be helpful to talk about the trauma you've experienced, what has happened, how you have felt, and what images come to your mind. This gives your brain the opportunity to process the events that are happening for you rather than pushing them away. It doesn't have to be the thing you're talking about all of the time, but sometimes it can be very helpful, and also helpful to people around you who are trying to understand what you're going through and how best to support you. It can be helpful to identify yourself as a survivor of the difficult times that you're going through rather than a victim. This can be difficult for people, particularly if they're looking at others who are dying or struggling in their care and maybe feeling guilty about the fact that they're going home and having a life while others are staying in a hospital bed and facing dire consequences. It's important to recognize and accept that the work you're doing is very difficult and challenging, and it is not any loss or weakness or vulnerability to suggest that you may be struggling and are in fact a survivor of this stress, and so are your colleagues. It's important to recognize that this is where you're at and you also need support and to take time for yourself. Coming home from work in either a heightened adrenaline state or in a very fatigued state, it can be difficult to think of and muster the energy to engage in positive behaviours. But it's important to try and find fun and engaging things to do, to look for opportunities to laugh, to hear other people's stories and engage in the things that have always nurtured and helped you in the past. It can be helpful to produce a list of things that might be helpful for you to engage with and even prompt family members to invite you into these. It can be difficult sometimes to remember to do positive things, but making it a plan can be very useful for you and helpful in the long term. When we experience traumatic events, particularly as healthcare workers, it can be very easy to focus totally on the negatives, on the people that you feel you're not saving, on the ways you're letting the system down, on the way the system itself is failing. But try to ground yourself in the facts. This is a pandemic. It is affecting everybody around the world, and it is nobody's fault. And it will end. And until then, you and your colleagues are trying your best, and that is all anybody can do. The nation is celebrating the effort that you are putting in, and it's important that you also celebrate that for yourself. You cannot complete the impossible, but you can try your best. The stress you are experiencing and some of the consequences on you are not a sign of weakness, but actually very normal for people who undertake the type of challenges that you are taking as healthcare workers. And it's important to believe that you are going to get through this, you are going to cope, and in the long term you're going to recover and get your well-being back to a place like it was before COVID. Recognize that your symptoms are connected to the seriousness of what's going on and the difficulty of the work, and that many people are feeling the same, and that many people who felt the same in the past and other places have gone on to recover and gone on to avoid PTSD. The primary strength usually in healthcare workers is their ability to help others, and this is something you can rely on also. You can reach out to others who are experiencing similar trauma, and you can offer support. In being able to listen to others talk about their trauma, it will also create the space for you to do the same and create a sense of support and union in which together you can create new ideas of how you can introduce positivity and be there for each other and believe in each other's ability to survive this. During a crisis, it can feel like you need to push on regardless, and that your emotions, or perhaps your inability to contain them, is your greatest threat. I've heard staff talk before about if they lift the lid, they won't be able to go on, and this is something they're afraid of, and so they push their emotions down and they don't let feelings out. Others have found it helpful to plan a particular time of the day, and that might just be 5 minutes in which you let yourself think about the things you're struggling with, the emotions you're having, how difficult it is for you, and if that brings tears or anger or stress or rage or whatever emotion, that's totally fine. And when the 5-minute alarm goes off, you breathe slowly, you pack it away, and you return back to your life. This might sound quite strange, but giving yourself the time to process what you've been through, to think about it, to let the emotions out, to let the images come to your mind, helps your brain and body to process what has happened to you and is a very live experience into a memory that can be put in the past and you can move away from. We hope this video is helpful to you, and we have other resources to support you with panic, with sleep, with decompressing after difficult shifts, and other areas of need, so please check on our website if you feel you could do with more support.